The glass walls of the boardroom turned the city's skyline into a stage backdrop, all steel and winter light. I sat at the far end of the polished mahogany table, my folder closed, hands still. 7 years of pulling this company back from the brink had taught me the value of silence. Damian Mercer, the new CEO, rose from his chair with the kind of swagger you only learn in lecture halls and hedge fund offices. "Effective immediately," he said, smoothing the lapel of his navy suit. "The position of head of strategic partnerships has been eliminated." He didn't bother to look at me until the last word. Then he smiled, thin and sharp, as if he had rehearsed the line in a mirror. The chuckles started at once. A few board members didn't even hide them, while others covered their smirks with half-raised hands. It wasn't humor. It was mockery. I kept my eyes steady, feeling the laughter slide across my skin like cold glass. Inside, though, I was oddly calm. This wasn't a surprise. For weeks, I had seen my name erased from presentations, had felt conversations stop when I walked into rooms. The playbook was old, and Damian was a predictable actor. I reached for my leather bag at my side. Papers rustled softly as I slid my notebook inside. The boardroom waited for me to break tears. A plea. Some scene to mark my fall. Instead, as I closed the zipper, I let a small black USB drive slip from my hand. It clattered onto the table, the sound sharp against the hush. Heads turned. Damian's smirk deepened, mistaking it for a mistake, but I didn't glance down. I simply straightened, let the drive sit there like a forgotten coin, and lifted a thin cream-colored envelope from my folder. "Before I leave," I said evenly, "you might want to check page 1. I placed the envelope directly in front of Damian and slid it across the glossy wood. The sound was softer than the USB's fall, but it carried more weight. The laughter faltered. Damian tilted his head, the grin tightening at the corners. For the first time, his eyes didn't look smug. They looked wary. I stepped back from the table, steadying my bag on my shoulder. The skyline glittered behind him, reflected in the glass wall like a warning. He tore the envelope open, and as his eyes scanned the first line, I saw the color drain from his face. The silence that followed wasn't mine. It belonged to the entire board, hanging thick in the air as Damian's fingers stiffened around the paper, his smirk dissolving into disbelief, just as I intended to carry with me into the next move. Damian's hand shook almost imperceptibly as he held the paper. His eyes moved quickly, then slower, as though each line resisted him. A few of the board members leaned forward, whispers slipping across the table. I didn't speak. I didn't need to. The ink on that page carried a weight no speech of mine could rival. 68%. Damian muttered, almost under his breath. He lifted his head, jaw tight, trying to recover authority. Pulse track. His tone wavered. Around him, the smirks had vanished. The same people who had laughed seconds ago now exchanged startled glances. The air was thick with calculation. I kept my face unreadable, but inside I felt the first quiet surge of vindication. My mind flicked back to 2 years earlier, when none of these men and women had been laughing. Stratus Global was bleeding out, revenue cratering, clients fleeing. The old CEO, Whitaker, had sat in his office with his tie undone, staring at spreadsheets like they were tombstones. "We don't make payroll next month," he'd told me, his voice ragged. "Camilla, unless you have a miracle. This company dies, so I worked one out. I called in every favor I had from my years in private equity and convinced Horizon Capital to look past Whitaker and invest in the only thing worth saving, PulseTrack, the logistics software I had nurtured for years. I spent endless nights across the table from their attorneys, hammering out clauses line by line. In one of those clauses, I buried the protection ownership tied to me, not to the shifting winds of Stratus. The memory still carried the scent of burnt coffee and stale conference rooms. I remembered glancing at my phone that night, seeing a photo message from my sister, my niece in her white cap and gown. I wasn't there to clap or hug her. I was bent over contracts, trading a family moment for the chance to keep hundreds of employees in work. That sacrifice became the foundation of the line Damien now held in his trembling hands. He tried to laugh, but the sound cracked. This must be a mistake. I let silence answer for me. Silence and the weight of 68%. The boardroom had flipped. No longer an execution chamber. It was a fault line. And I stood squarely on the side that mattered as I turned toward the next battle already forming. Damien Mercer hadn't come out of nowhere. His resume gleamed with Harvard polish, his LinkedIn full of hedge fund applause. The board had eaten it up. They saw a man who spoke in bullet points and carried connections like trophies. To them, that was leadership. To me, it was theater. From his first week, he made sure everyone felt the performance. He reorganized departments with the slash of a pen, as though human beings were just expense lines. Senior staff who had given decades were paraded into meetings only to be cut down in front of interns. I watched one director of operations, a man who had built entire networks from scratch, leave the boardroom with his shoulders bent like a broken wing after Damien mocked his outdated instincts. I knew my turn would come. I saw the way he skimmed past my slides during presentations, how he began redirecting client calls that should have landed on my desk. Whole projects I had shepherded disappeared overnight, my name scrubbed from the record. He flaunted his youth at every opportunity, joking that Stratus needed new blood while his tailored suit gleamed under the fluorescent lights. But I didn't fight him outright. I had learned long ago that sometimes survival meant silence. I watched, waited, cataloged every move. One night, long after most had left, I passed through the lobby on my way out. Damien's voice echoed from a corner, sharp and low. He stood near the glass doors, phone pressed to his ear. "Once Pulse Track's clean," he was saying, "Titan X doubles my bonus. You heard me, double. They want the rights uncontested. I'll deliver." I froze, my hand tightening around my bag strap. Titan X Logistics, the competitor circling us for years. My stomach clenched. Damien wasn't just reckless. He was compromised. He was willing to sell out the very asset that had saved Stratus, the one I had poured every ounce of myself into. He ended the call abruptly, turning just enough that I stepped back into shadow. He didn't see me. I let him walk past, his cologne trailing arrogance in the empty lobby. That night, lying awake in my Brooklyn loft, I replayed his words. Proof sat in my memory like a live wire. But proof could burn both ways, and I had to decide whether exposing him would destroy him or everything I had fought to protect. The heels of my shoes clicked sharply against the marble corridor as I left the boardroom. Behind me, the murmurs swelled like a hive disturbed. I didn't look back. The elevator doors closed, and with them, the sound of Damien's unraveling. For a moment, the city stretched below me like an open map, glittering and indifferent. By the time I stepped out into the cold Manhattan air, my phone was vibrating so violently it felt alive in my hand. 6 missed calls, then 8, then 12. The first voice I answered was Rachel Vega, our operations director, her tone high and ragged. "Camilla." "What did you do?" she whispered, as if saying my name too loudly might set off alarms. "Investors are calling nonstop Marcus from Horizon. Helena, too. They're demanding explanations." Damien's in free fall. I could hear office noise behind her, phones ringing off the hook. The chaos I had predicted. I let her panic spill out before answering. "Rachel, breathe." This is the moment they finally read what's been in front of them for 2 years. Let them sweat. Silence, then a shaky exhale. God help us. "You actually did it." I ended the call before doubt could climb into her voice again. But it climbed into mine later, after I reached my loft in Brooklyn. The exposed brick walls and wide windows usually steadied me. That night they felt too open, like the city could peer inside and see what I wasn't showing the boardroom fear. I set my phone on the counter, poured a glass of water, and stared at the skyline. A new vibration rattled against the wood. An email. No sender, no subject. Just one line in bold. 68% won't save you forever. My throat tightened. It wasn't surprise I had expected retaliation, but the precision of the threat landed like ice water. I closed the laptop slowly, as if shutting the lid might smother the words. It didn't. They burned against the inside of my eyelids. I dialed my brother. Elias answered on the second ring, his voice warm, steady. "Cam, you okay?" For a beat, I couldn't answer. "Finally," I whispered. "What if I started a war I can't finish?" He paused, then spoke in the quiet, certain tone that had steadied me since childhood. "Paper is stronger than swagger. Remember that. You wrote the contracts. That's your shield." I pressed the phone against my ear, closing my eyes as if I could lean on his certainty. Still, when I hung up, the silence felt heavier than before, carrying with it the knowledge that Damien's counterattack might not come under bright boardroom lights, but in the shadows already moving around me. The following morning, my inbox lit up with a summons, "Emergency Call Horizon Capital." The subject line carried the kind of urgency that stripped away sleep. I dressed quickly, sat at my desk, and let the screen glow to life. Faces tiled across the video call, partners in suits framed by penthouse windows, Marcus Grant at the head, calm as ever, and beside him, Helena Cho, her sharp gaze flicking toward me like a blade. Damien appeared too, already postured in his office, tie knotted tight as if that alone could hold him together. "This situation is untenable," Damien began, voice sharp. "Ms. Rowan is leveraging a contractual loophole to hold this company hostage. PulseTrack is Stratus property, not a bargaining chip." I waited for the echoes of his words to fade before answering. "No, Damien. PulseTrack is Stratus's lifeline, and without my clause, there wouldn't be a company left to argue about. I safeguarded investors from short-term greed. That's not hostage-taking, it's stewardship." Marcus leaned back, fingers steepled, but Helena cut in before he could respond. "Stewardship?" she asked, her tone laced with disdain. "Or self-interest Titan-X has expressed interest in PulseTrack for months. If we want stability, we should sell while the market's hot. Cut her out, monetize the asset, move on." My stomach tightened. Damien's eyes flickered, a spark of triumph he didn't bother to hide. He hadn't come alone to this fight. Helena was standing squarely at his side. I steadied my voice. Selling PulseTrack to Titan-X would hand them the very advantage that keeps Stratus alive. Every revenue stream you're enjoying stems from that code. Without it, Stratus is a shell. Marcus finally spoke, his voice deliberate, heavy. "Helena has a point about market timing, but Camilla is right about reliance. Horizon doesn't invest in corpses, and without PulseTrack, Stratus is one." Tension crackled through the call. Partners murmured, some nodding toward Helena, others toward me. It was no longer just Damien versus me. The board itself was fracturing. The investors I had once trusted now split down the middle. I kept my expression still, even as my pulse hammered. Marcus's silence at the end was worse than Damien's accusations. He was weighing scales I couldn't yet see, and the balance could tip either way as I prepared for the next move already forming. By mid-afternoon, I was walking through Midtown, the glass towers rising like stern judges above me. I pushed through the revolving doors of Singh and Patel, and within minutes, I was seated across from Maya Singh. She didn't waste time with pleasantries. Her dark hair was pulled into a severe knot, her desk already cleared, waiting for the storm I had brought with me. We spread the contracts across the table like a battlefield map. The Horizon Agreement, the IP schedules, the board minutes all laid out in careful rows. I slid forward a printed email, the one I had sent 6 weeks earlier. The subject line still made my chest tighten. For avoidance of doubt. In it, I warned Whitaker and the board secretary that governance changes could trigger the pulse track reversion clause. No one had replied, but I had the read receipts like glowing red embers. Maya tapped her pen against the paper. This is good. Very good. We'll file for declaratory judgment confirming your ownership, plus an injunction to block any defamation attempts. They can scream, but paper doesn't lie. I exhaled slowly, watching her mark each page with sticky notes, her movements precise, unhurried. The calm steadied me. But calm never lasted long. An hour later, I received a message from Rachel Need to see you. Urgent. We met in a small cafe on 8th Avenue, the kind of place where steam fogged the windows and the clatter of cups masked low voices. She sat already, a knit hat pulled low, her hands trembling as she pushed a flash drive across the table. Don't ask how I got it, she whispered. But you need to see. I closed my fingers over the drive, feeling its weight disproportionate to its size. Back at Maya's office, we opened the files. Screenshots of Slack channels filled the screen. Damien's words blared in stark text. Float a press note Rowan planning to sell PulseTrack privately. Leak to blogs. Make her the villain. Maya leaned back, a slow smile spreading across her face. This is gold. He buried himself. But as I scrolled through the threads, my stomach tightened. Every word Damien had typed could save me, or if twisted, could make me the bullseye of a war he was ready to wage in the court of public opinion. The call came from HR just before noon. Their tone was clipped, rehearsed. Miss Rowan, we'll need you to surrender your company laptop and phone immediately. Standard procedure. I almost laughed. Standard procedure during what? A pause. Then the hollow reply, disputes. The word tasted like ash. I hung up before my anger could spill over. Outside my window, Brooklyn felt distant. The skyline across the river just another wall of glass, indifferent to whether I crumbled or not. By evening, the escalation grew sharper. When I returned from a walk, a plain white envelope lay half-tucked under my apartment door. My name was scrawled across it, black ink, heavy and uneven. I slid it open with hesitant fingers. PulseTrack belongs to us. Quit or be erased. The letters were blocky, impersonal, but the menace seeped through them like oil. I sat on the couch, the paper limp in my hands, and for the first time in days, my chest constricted with something dangerously close to panic. The veneer of control I had worn in the boardroom cracked in the silence of my loft. The knock on the door jolted me. Elias stepped inside before I could even speak, his presence grounding, his coat still damp from the rain. "You're not spending tonight alone," he said firmly, scanning the room like he expected shadows to crawl from the corners. I wanted to argue, to cling to independence, but the envelope still trembled on the coffee table. I just nodded. We shared dinner in silence, the hum of the refrigerator the only sound between us. His presence was both comfort and reminder someone else could see the cracks I tried to hide. Later, my phone buzzed again. This time, it wasn't a call but a headline notification. I opened it with a sinking heart. Insiders claim Rowan shopped PulseTrack to rivals. The blog post was already gathering comments, speculation pouring in from anonymous voices that fed on scandal. Screenshots taken out of context, whispers spun into accusations. I stared at the glowing screen, pulse hammering, the words blurring together until all I could see was Damien's hand orchestrating every syllable. The war was no longer confined to contracts and clauses. It had slipped into the shadows, and now the world outside my walls was being taught to believe the lie. The courthouse smelled faintly of polish and nerves. At 8:30 sharp, I sat beside Maya at the long oak table, documents neatly stacked in front of us, across the aisle. Damien, flanked by two attorneys, wore his navy suit like armor, though the twitch of his jaw betrayed him. The judge skimmed the filings, tapping his pen against the docket. "The ownership rights appear unambiguous," he said finally. "The motion for emergency relief is denied." His gavel cracked once, clean and final. Damien's head snapped up, his lawyers whispering frantically, but I didn't smile. Not here. Not yet. Maya touched my arm lightly, a reminder that restraint was its own form of victory. We gathered our files and walked out, the echo of the gavel still pulsing in my ears. At 9:00, I stepped into a different room but carried the same silence of authority with me. The extraordinary board session was already in motion, faces tight, papers spread like shields. Horizon's partners sat at the far end, Marcus unreadable. Helena glancing at Damien with something close to allegiance. Damien seized the floor first, words spilling too fast, his tone dripping with urgency. This company cannot operate fractured. Her clause destabilizes us, undermines confidence, scares clients. He gestured toward me, a man trying to paint a target where one no longer existed. I let the noise wash over me, then slid a single sheet across the table. The license remains only if governance is ethical and free of sabotage. Breach that, and PulseTrack reverts. Entirely. Gasps broke the air like glass shattering. Chairs shifted. Helena's brows shot up. Even the board secretary faltered, pen hovering midair. Damien tried to recover, leaning forward with forced bravado. She's bluffing. She wouldn't dare pull the license, she'd sink her own investment. It was Marcus who ended the charade. He adjusted his glasses, pulled a printed packet from his briefcase, and laid it flat for the board to see. Slack messages, Damien's own words, urging legal to fabricate angles, to float a press story branding me a traitor. The room stilled. Whispers surged, sharp and electric. Damien's face blanched as eyes turned from him to me, the balance tilting in real time. I folded my hands, waiting, knowing the decision would come not from my defense, but from the weight of his lies now laid bare. The boardroom silence cracked under Marcus's voice. "We've reviewed the evidence," he said, his tone deliberate. Damien Mercer acted in bad faith, effective immediately. We call for a vote of removal. No one protested, not even Helena. Hands rose around the table, one after another, the decision unfolding with the same inevitability as a tide. I sat still, my expression unreadable, though every beat of my heart echoed with the memory of that same room only days earlier, when laughter had accompanied my supposed elimination. The vote concluded. Damien's face blanched, a thin sheen of sweat breaking across his forehead. He sputtered protests, technicalities, excuses, but no one listened. Security entered, quiet and professional, and placed a hand on his shoulder. For a fleeting second, his eyes locked on mine, burning with disbelief. He had envisioned my humiliation. Now he was the one escorted through the glass doors, his footsteps uneven, his exit a perfect mirror of the execution he had staged for me. When the door closed behind him, the room exhaled. Marcus turned, folding his hands. "Camilla, Horizon supports you. We would like you to assume the role of interim CEO until permanent arrangements are made." The words landed with both weight and relief. I nodded once. Steady. No triumphant grin, no grand gesture, just the acceptance of a role I had fought for in silence long before today. The papers that had saved me now tethered me to an even heavier responsibility. That night, back in my Brooklyn loft, I poured a glass of wine and settled by the window. The city lights glimmered against the dark sky, blinking like quiet witnesses. I should have felt victorious, but instead I felt hollow at the edges. Sacrifice had carved too many pieces from me. Missed birthdays, strained family dinners, nights spent bargaining with lawyers instead of sleeping. Yet there it was, vindication. They had tried to erase me, to write me off as a liability, and instead I had inscribed myself into the company's future with ink that couldn't be washed away. I lifted my glass, watching the skyline blur in the reflection of the wine's surface. "Power isn't given," I whispered into the night. "It's written." And this time, I wrote the ending myself.